In the middle of an elegant dinner, Claire Whitman comes face to face with a figure from her past. Across the table, her teenage ex-boyfriend, Derek Marshall, humiliates her with a smile. Claire was always the joke of the family. The table laughs. Claire does not. She simply offers a serene smile, that of someone who has long made peace with her own story. Years later, fate brings them face to face again in an unexpected way. Now the director of a nonprofit organization, Claire comes across a request for help for a child with leukemia, Derek's son. This is not a story about revenge. It's about silent transformation, about overcoming pain, and about a strength that doesn't need to be loud. It simply acts. Watch how quiet dignity becomes the loudest answer. Subscribe for stories of healing, strength, and unexpected redemption. Chapter 1. The Words That Lingered. The November air in Asheville was crisp and scented with pine as Claire Whitman adjusted her cashmere scarf and took a deep breath before walking up the stone pathway to the Morgan family home. White columns framed the entrance of the sprawling colonial house, adorned with tasteful Thanksgiving decorations, cornucopias and autumn wreaths that whispered of old money and tradition. At 32, Claire had become an expert at these gatherings, having dated Thomas, the youngest son of the family, for nearly 3 years during college. "You made it," Thomas greeted her at the door, his familiar smile bringing back memories of a simpler time. He embraced her warmly, the scent of his cologne both foreign and familiar. "Mom insisted you come. You know how she is, always treating you like the daughter she never had." Claire tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, her green eyes crinkling with a genuine smile. Some traditions are worth keeping, even after everything. Thomas's marriage 2 years ago had been amicable enough. His wife Elaine was kind and secure in herself, which made these occasional family reunions possible. Claire had been invited because Margaret Morgan, the matriarch, had never quite accepted that Claire wasn't going to become her daughter-in-law. The dining room was a tableau of American prosperity, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, fine china laid out with military precision, and the Morgan family arranged around the table like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. Claire was seated across from Derek Marshall, Thomas's cousin, her high school sweetheart before Thomas, and the first boy who had ever broken her heart. "Claire," Derek nodded, raising his glass slightly. At 34, he had the confident posture of someone who had never truly struggled. His once boyish features had hardened into sharp angles, his dark hair now touched with distinguished silver at the temples. "Still doing that charity work?" She met his gaze steadily. "The Lighthouse Foundation." "Yes." "Admirable," he said, the words somehow managing to sound less than sincere. "Always the humanitarian." Dinner progressed with the practiced rhythm of people who knew what was expected of them. Margaret's turkey was perfectly cooked, the conversation flowing between politics, kept carefully nonpartisan, Thomas's new promotion, and reminiscences that everyone had heard before but politely laughed at again. It was during dessert, pumpkin pie with homemade whipped cream, that Derek, now on his 3rd glass of wine, began to entertain the table with stories from their high school days. "Remember when Claire tried to join the debate team?" he chuckled, swirling the burgundy liquid in his glass. "She prepared for weeks and then completely froze during her first competition." Claire felt her cheeks warm but kept her smile in place, the way her mother had taught her. Never let them see you're affected. "Or that time she tried to organize that charity concert that nobody came to?" Derek continued, gaining momentum as others around the table began to smile in anticipation. "She was always trying so hard to prove herself." Thomas shot her an apologetic glance, but said nothing. The room had that peculiar energy of collective amusement at someone else's expense, uncomfortable but too enticing to stop. Derek leaned back in his chair, the crystal chandelier casting shadows across his face as he delivered his coup de grace. "Claire was always the joke of the family. But at least she tried." Laughter rippled around the mahogany table, not cruel exactly, but thoughtless. the kind that comes from people who have never had to question their place in the world. Claire didn't join in. Instead, she carefully placed her napkin beside her half-eaten pie and offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the kind of smile that only comes from someone who made peace with herself long ago. I've found that trying is actually the bravest thing we can do, even when we fail. The laughter faded. For a moment, no one spoke, the weight of her simple truth settling over the table like the first snow of winter. Margaret, ever the hostess, quickly steered the conversation to safer ground, asking about Elaine's mother's recovery from hip surgery. Claire excused herself to help clear the plates, grateful for the momentary escape. In the kitchen, away from the performance of the dining room, she allowed herself a single deep breath, closing her eyes briefly as she set the plates beside the sink. "He's always been like that," came a soft voice behind her. It was Elaine, Thomas's wife, her dark eyes kind. "Derek, I mean. Thomas told me about your history." Claire shrugged, the gesture elegant despite its casualness. "High school was a long time ago."
"Still," Elaine said, taking the plates from Claire's hands, "what you're doing with the Lighthouse Foundation, it matters. My sister's best friend received help from a similar organization when her daughter was sick. Those places save lives." Claire smiled, genuinely this time. "That's why I do it." Later, as she drove back to her apartment in downtown Asheville, the twinkling lights of the city reflecting on her windshield, Derek's words echoed in her mind. The joke of the family. She hadn't expected them to still have the power to sting after all these years. But as she parked and made her way up to her apartment, a space filled with books, plants, and carefully chosen artwork that reflected her journey, she realized something. The girl who had been devastated by Derek's casual cruelty was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built a life of purpose. She kicked off her heels and settled on her couch, opening her laptop to check her work emails. The Lighthouse Foundation never truly slept. There were always families in crisis, always children needing help. As the director of the nonprofit, Claire had made it her mission to ensure that no family had to choose between financial ruin and their child's health. Before closing her laptop for the night, she typed out a quick update for her social media followers. "Today, I was reminded that our past shapes us but doesn't define us. The Lighthouse Foundation has helped 157 families this year alone. If you're watching this and want to be part of something bigger than yourself, subscribe to our channel for weekly stories of hope and healing. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in having all the answers. It's in simply showing up and trying, again and again." As the city lights cast long shadows across her living room, Claire felt a peculiar sense of gratitude. For Derek's words, for her journey, and for the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's living well. Little did she know that their paths would cross again, in circumstances neither of them could have imagined. Chapter 2. The Application. 5 years passed like the seasons, steady, transformative, and somehow both slow and swift at once. Claire's work at the Lighthouse Foundation had expanded beyond Asheville, reaching families across North Carolina and into neighboring states. What had begun as a small nonprofit operating out of a converted storage room now occupied an entire floor of an office building downtown, with a staff of 23 dedicated individuals who believed, as Claire did, that medical care was a right, not a privilege. It was a Tuesday in early April, rain pattering against the windows of her office, when Marissa, her assistant director, knocked on her open door. "Another batch of applications for review," she said, placing a folder on Claire's desk. "The board approved the expanded criteria for the pediatric oncology program, so we've got a few more than usual." Claire nodded, pushing her glasses up on her nose. "I'll go through them tonight." "There's one that might need expedited review," Marissa hesitated, tapping a blue folder at the top of the stack. 7-year-old with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Single father, veteran, insurance complications. They're on a waiting list for treatment at Duke.
I'll look at it first." Claire promised, already reaching for the blue folder. Later that evening, in the quiet of her apartment, with jazz playing softly in the background and rain still tapping against the windows, Claire opened the blue folder and felt her world shift on its axis. The child's name was Liam Marshall. Father, Derek Marshall. Former Marine, honorably discharged after 2 tours in Afghanistan. Currently unemployed due to caregiver responsibilities. Insurance status? Pending appeal after denial of coverage for experimental treatment. Claire stared at the photograph attached to the application. A little boy with his father's jawline but softer eyes, his smile revealing a missing front tooth. 7 years old, born to Derek and his ex-wife Vanessa, according to the family history section. She set the folder down, walked to her kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water with hands that weren't quite steady. Through the window, she could see the lights of Asheville blurred by rain, each droplet on the glass fracturing the city into countless parallel versions of itself. Claire was always the joke of the family, but at least she tried. The words came back to her unbidden, but now they felt hollow, stripped of their power to wound. What would Derek think if he knew that his son's fate now rested partly in her hands? Would he laugh then? Would he still see her efforts as something to mock? She returned to her desk and read the application more carefully. Liam had been diagnosed 8 months ago. Initial treatment had shown promise, but the cancer had returned aggressively. The experimental treatment being proposed had an 83% success rate in clinical trials, but the insurance company had deemed it investigational and denied coverage. The cost? $475,000. Claire pulled up the foundation's financial dashboard on her laptop. The Pediatric Oncology Fund had $1.2 million allocated for the quarter. Approving Liam's treatment would be significant, but not impossible. She pulled up her phone, then set it down again. What would she even say to Derek after all these years? "Remember how you humiliated me at Thanksgiving? Well, I'm now in a position to save your son's life." Ironic, isn't it? No, this wasn't about Derek. It wasn't about their history or vindication or proving anything to anyone. It was about a 7-year-old boy with his father's jawline and a missing front tooth. Claire reached for a blank approval form and began filling it out. Under special notes, she wrote, "Expedite all processes. Treatment to begin immediately upon hospital acceptance. Full funding approved." She hesitated over the signature line, then signed her name. Not as Claire Whitman, Derek's ex-girlfriend, but as Claire Whitman, Executive Director of the Lighthouse Foundation. The next morning, she handed the approval to Marissa. "Process this immediately." And Marissa, "I don't need to be involved in the direct communication with the family." Marissa raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Any particular reason?" Claire looked out at the Asheville skyline, now clear and bright after the previous day's rain. "Sometimes it's better for the foundation to be the hero, not the individuals within it." "If you say so," Marissa said, clearly puzzled but willing to follow Claire's lead. In the weeks that followed, Claire received the standard updates on Liam's case. The hospital had accepted him immediately. The treatment had begun. Early responses were promising. She read each report carefully, filing them away in a drawer in her desk rather than leaving them in the general system. She didn't seek out additional information about Derek, not where he was living, not who he had become in the years since that Thanksgiving dinner, not how he was coping with his son's illness. Those weren't details she needed to know. The foundation had clear protocols. They funded treatment, provided support resources, and maintained appropriate boundaries. 3 months into Liam's treatment, Claire was working late, the office quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Did you know Derek's back in Asheville? His son's sick, leukemia. Terrible situation. He's staying at his parents' old place while the boy's getting some special treatment. Thought you should know." Claire stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Thanks for letting me know. I hope his son recovers." She set the phone down and turned back to her computer, but the spreadsheet before her blurred as unexpected tears filled her eyes. Not for Derek, not even for their shared past, but for the strange interconnectedness of life, how we can never truly know the ways our paths will cross and recross, forming patterns we could never have predicted. Outside her office window, the summer sun was setting behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She watched it until the colors faded to twilight, thinking about a little boy fighting for his life and a father learning the hardest lesson of all, that some things in life, no matter how hard you try, are beyond your control. The following day, a nurse from Duke called with an update. Liam was responding remarkably well to the treatment. His latest tests showed a significant reduction in cancer cells. The prognosis, while still guarded, was increasingly optimistic. His father wanted me to personally thank the foundation, the nurse said. He says it's nothing short of a miracle that you approved the funding so quickly. We're just doing our job, Claire replied, her voice steady. Please keep us updated on Liam's progress. She hung up and sat for a moment, allowing herself to feel the simple human joy of knowing that a child had a fighting chance. Whatever else had happened, whatever history lay between her and Derek, this was what mattered. Not revenge, not proving a point, but the quiet power of being able to help when help was needed most. That night, as she walked home through the gentle Asheville evening, Claire felt lighter somehow, as if she had set down a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. The lingering echo of Derek's words from that Thanksgiving dinner had finally faded away completely, replaced by the simple knowledge that she had done what was right, not because of their history, but despite it.
Chapter 3: The Note. Autumn returned to Asheville in a riot of color, transforming the Blue Ridge Mountains into a patchwork quilt of crimson, gold, and russet. Claire's morning runs through the park near her apartment became a daily communion with this transformation, watching as green surrendered to fire, as summer's lushness gave way to fall's more poignant beauty. On this particular morning, the air was cool enough to turn her breath to mist as she jogged along the familiar path. 6 months had passed since she'd approved Liam Marshall's treatment. According to the latest report, which had arrived just yesterday, he was in remission. The experimental therapy had worked exactly as hoped, and while he would need ongoing monitoring, his prognosis was excellent. Claire slowed to a walk as she reached her favorite overlook, a small clearing that offered a panoramic view of the city nestled among the mountains. The sun was just cresting the eastern ridge, bathing everything in a golden light that seemed to Claire both blessing and benediction. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of her running jacket. It was Marissa. "You need to come into the office," her assistant director said without preamble. "There's something you should see." "Is everything okay?" Claire asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing's wrong," Marissa assured her. "Just come when you can." An hour later, showered and dressed in a simple charcoal dress with a teal scarf, the Lighthouse Foundation's signature color, Claire walked into her office to find a small package on her desk. Plain brown paper, no return address, just her name written in a strong, slanting hand she didn't recognize. "It was hand-delivered this morning," Marissa explained, hovering in the doorway. "The security desk called up to ask if they should accept it. I said yes." She hesitated. "I hope that was okay." Claire nodded, studying the package. "Did they say who delivered it?" "A man. That's all Hector mentioned." Marissa lingered a moment longer. "Do you want me to stay while you open it?" "No, it's fine. Thank you." Claire waited until Marissa had closed the door behind her before carefully unwrapping the package. Inside was a simple wooden box, the kind sold in craft stores for DIY projects. Claire lifted the lid and felt her breath catch. Nestled on a bed of tissue paper was a small, carved lighthouse, delicately crafted from what appeared to be pale driftwood, with a tiny light in the tower that glowed softly when she lifted it. Beneath it lay a card, cream-colored and heavy-weight. She opened it with fingers that weren't quite steady.
You saved my son's life. I don't know why you did it, but I'll never forget it. DM. Claire sat down slowly, the card in one hand, the wooden White House in the other. After all this time, after everything, he knew. Somehow, Derek had discovered that she was behind the funding that had saved Liam's life. She set the lighthouse carefully on her desk, where the morning sunlight caught its edges, making the little beacon seem to truly glow. Then she read the note again, searching for any hint of their shared history, any acknowledgement of the past that connected them long before Liam's illness had created this new, unexpected bridge. There was nothing, just those 3 simple sentences: an acknowledgement, a question, and a promise. And perhaps that was enough. Claire picked up her phone, then set it down again. What would she say? How would she explain the complex tangle of emotions that had led her to approve Liam's funding without revealing her identity? It hadn't been about revenge or redemption. It hadn't even been about Derek, not really. It had been about doing what was right because she could. Instead, she opened her laptop and navigated to the Foundation's social media page. Their following had grown substantially over the past year, with more than 200,000 subscribers to their channel. Each week, Claire shared stories of families they had helped, always with permission, always with dignity and respect. Today, she typed something different. Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways. Today, I was reminded that when we act from a place of compassion rather than judgment, we heal not only others, but ourselves as well. The work we do at the Lighthouse Foundation isn't just about medical treatment. It's about recognizing our shared humanity in both triumph and suffering. If you're watching and want to be part of a community dedicated to making a difference one family at a time, subscribe to our channel and join us on this journey. Because in the end, what matters isn't who was right or wrong, but who was kind when it mattered most. She posted it, then turned back to the carved lighthouse on her desk. After a moment's consideration, she placed it on the windowsill, where it would catch the light throughout the day, a small but constant reminder of the unexpected ways our lives touch one another. That evening, as Claire was preparing to leave, Marissa appeared in her doorway again. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "He doesn't have an appointment." Claire looked up, suddenly knowing with absolute certainty who it was. "Derek Marshall?" Marissa nodded. "Should I tell him you've already left?" Claire took a deep breath, gathering herself. "No, I'll see him." Marissa stepped aside, and there he was, Derek Marshall, standing in the doorway of her office, looking both different and the same as he had at that Thanksgiving dinner 5 years ago. The silver at his temples had spread, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worry. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, casual yet dignified. His posture, once so confidently careless, now held a new kind of gravity.
"Claire," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. "Derek." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please, sit down." He did, his movements careful, deliberate. For a moment, neither spoke. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden light between them. "How did you find out?" Claire finally asked. Derek's smile was slight, tinged with something like embarrassment. "One of the nurses at Duke mentioned the Foundation's director by name, said you'd personally expedited Liam's application." He met her eyes directly. It wasn't hard to connect the dots after that. Claire nodded, accepting this. "How is Liam doing?" "Better every day." For the first time, real emotion broke through Derek's composed exterior, a father's relief, pure and profound. The doctors are calling it a textbook response to the treatment. He's back in school part-time, playing soccer again. "I'm glad," Claire said, and meant it with every fiber of her being.
Derek leaned forward slightly. What I can't figure out is why. After what happened at that Thanksgiving dinner, he trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the memory. I was cruel to you. Deliberately cruel. Claire considered her response carefully. This wasn't about that dinner, Derek, or about you and me. It was about Liam. But you could have refused, or just let the application go through normal channels, which might have been too late. His eyes, so like his son's in the photograph, searched hers. Instead, you fast-tracked everything. Why? The question hung between them, weighted with their shared history and all the years that had passed since they were young and careless with each other's hearts. Because I could, Claire said simply. Because I was in a position to help, and that's what the Lighthouse Foundation exists to do, help families in crisis, regardless of who they are or what might have happened in the past. Derek nodded slowly, accepting her answer even if he didn't fully believe it. Thank you doesn't seem adequate. It's not necessary at all, Claire assured him. Seeing Liam recover is thanks enough. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He drew this for you. For the foundation, I mean, when I told him I was coming to say thank you in person. Claire accepted the envelope, opening it carefully. Inside was a child's drawing of a lighthouse on a cliff, with stick figures standing beside it. Beneath it, in the careful printing of a 7-year-old, "Thank you for making me better." He has your eyes, Claire said softly, looking up from the drawing.
Something shifted in Derek's expression then, a recognition, perhaps, of the strange symmetry of their situation. How the boy he had fathered had been saved by the woman he had once wounded with careless words. "I'm not the same person I was at that dinner," he said after a moment. "Liam's illness, it changes you, makes you see what matters and what doesn't." Claire nodded. "Life has a way of teaching us exactly the lessons we need to learn." They fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not strained or awkward, but contemplative, almost peaceful. Finally, Derek stood. "I won't take up any more of your time. I just needed to thank you in person." Claire rose as well. "I'm truly happy that Liam is doing well." Derek hesitated, then extended his hand across the desk. Claire took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the brief connection bridging years and mistakes and growth. "The lighthouse you sent, did you make it?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Yes, woodworking became a kind of therapy during Liam's treatment, something to do with my hands during the long hours at the hospital." "It's beautiful," Claire said. "Thank you." Derek nodded once more, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused, looking back at her. "What you've built here? It matters, Claire. It really matters." After he left, Claire stood at her window for a long time, watching as the sun set behind the mountains, turning the sky to flame and then to deepening blue. On the windowsill, the carved lighthouse caught the last rays of sunlight, its tiny beacon glowing warm and steady against the gathering dusk. She thought about the strange, winding paths that had brought her here, from that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner to this moment of unexpected closure. How a single cruel comment had somehow, through time and circumstance and choice, led to this: a child healed, a lesson learned, a circle somehow completed. That night before leaving the office, Claire made one final post to the Foundation's channel. "Today I was reminded that transformation doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly in small gestures and second chances. At the Lighthouse Foundation, we believe that everyone deserves not just health, but dignity, not just treatment, but compassion. If you're watching and believe in the power of second chances, subscribe to our channel and be part of a community that's redefining what healing truly means. Because sometimes the greatest journeys aren't about traveling great distances, but about returning to ourselves, changed, humbled, and ultimately stronger for having weathered the storm." As she walked home through the autumn evening, leaves crunching beneath her feet and stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky,
Claire felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with revenge or vindication. This wasn't a story about getting even. It was about growing beyond pain, about the quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply acts.
And in that action, in that choice to help rather than hurt, to heal rather than hold grudges, perhaps there was a kind of redemption, not just for Derek, but for Claire herself. A reminder that while we cannot always choose what happens to us, we can always choose how we respond. In the end, that was the only power that truly mattered.